Oh, hello. What was that? And let's see if this stream starts to work. There's always a little bit of a delay. Angus, can you mute your mic, please? I think there's some background. Oh, you are muted. Oh, it works. Perfect. Cool. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Deep Dive. Today we are joined by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Is it alright if I call you Ben? Ben is just like a standard thing.
That would be best. Ben is great.
Hey, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. How are you doing?
Doing awesome, man. Happy to be with you.
Fantastic. So for the people in the audience who might not know who you are, we've got a lot of information in the video description about what you do and links to all your stuff and the books and everything. But can you give us a quick intro about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so live here in Orlando, Florida. I've got my PhD in organizational psychology, and I'm a writer. I've been writing for the last 5 years on the internet. For a long time, I was the top writer in the world at medium.com, which is kind of a blogging platform, honestly, based in Silicon Valley. So I wrote there for a really long time and was able to grow a huge email list. And then I've since written a few books. Willpower Doesn't Work, Personality Isn't Permanent. On the personal level, my wife and I adopted 3 kids from the foster system while I was doing my PhD, and now we have twins, so we've got 5 kids. Quite a bit for some millennials, but enjoying it, and just grateful to be chatting with you, man.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on. The first thing I wanted to ask you, what is an organizational psychologist? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so organizational psychology is very different from, like, let's just say, like, being a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I more study, like, let's just say, like, leadership and, like, team dynamics and how you, like, motivate your people and how you hire the right people and, like, how you fire people. Like, although I don't, like, necessarily apply that, mostly I was interested in, like, the leadership side, like how you actually, like, motivate people and stuff like that. So that was kind of how I studied it. But yeah, a lot of people who get my degree end up becoming, like, consultants or, like, trainers for employees and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Do you like, because I think like almost just under a year ago now, I hired kind of my first team members for this YouTube channel and the business and things. And so I started reading a lot of books about like management and leadership and stuff. Is there anything that you would recommend that like sort of must read or kind of must have resources about the topic?
I studied Dan Sullivan, honestly. Have you ever heard of Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach?
I've heard of Strategic Coach.
Yeah, so Dan
Yeah.
Sullivan is he's the CEO of that. He is the coach of Strategic Coach, and
Okay.
he's been training the best entrepreneurs for like decades. So I study everything that he creates, and he creates a lot of little books. He's got a lot of free resources, and so he's pretty impressive. I'd go with Dan Sullivan.
Fantastic. Okay, I will definitely check him out, and we'll put links to his stuff in the live blog Notion page for anyone who's following along. So you've got 2 books at the moment, and one that is coming out soon.
Yep. Yeah, I
Um,
actually have a book coming out with Dan Sullivan. We're coming out with a book all about entrepreneurship called Who Not How. It's actually literally how to build a team and collaborate with people who are where you want to be.
oh, interesting. That sounds like exactly the book that I'd want to read. Uh, so your first 2 book, your first one was Willpower Doesn't Work,
Yep.
and the second one is Personality Isn't Permanent. So I wonder if we can start with Willpower Doesn't Work. I mean, I guess it's in the title, but what's the book about?
Yeah, the premise is that in Western culture, I guess you could say like Europe and America, we're very individualistic. We kind of ignore, let's just say, context. But the book is all about how context is more important than the individual. So like the situation matters a lot more than you think it does. So for example, my foster kids, they came from a very limiting situation. So it didn't matter how much willpower, energy they put towards their goals until they changed their situation, they wouldn't be able to do much. And so the book teaches you how to eliminate crap from your environment, but also how to put yourself in the right situation so that you can achieve your goals. So it's really about how environment matters more than what you can do on your own.
Okay. And so if someone's in a position where they are in kind of a bad place structurally, systemically, can they really change that? Like how?
There's a lot of things you can do to change it. I mean, when I was I grew up in a tough situation. My parents got divorced. My father became a drug addict. And one of the things I did to change my environment, I actually left my state, went and like did some humanitarian and missionary work. So like I got in myself into a new situation. It's like, so sometimes you have to get yourself into a new situation, but also kind of like what I would talk about in the book Who Not How. Sometimes you can collaborate with people. I mean, you can put yourself around the right mentors, put yourself in the right environments. So yeah, I mean, we can all change our environment in many ways.
Okay. And you've written a lot of stuff about that on Medium. I was browsing through your your articles there. So you were the top writer on Medium for a while. Like, what's your relationship with Medium these days?
The platform has changed a lot.
Yeah.
When I first started writing there in 2015, it was and I don't really know all of what's going on YouTube. Like YouTube feels like, you could create a channel. I don't know all of the rules and the restrictions and like how the algorithms and stuff like that work. But when I first started on Medium, it was a very open platform where like basically a lot of people could like and share articles, and the more people that liked it, the more it would go into like everyone's news feeds, and then it would go into like the top stories, and then like so things had a lot higher chance of going viral. Whereas as they grew as a platform and tried to become basically as they tried to become profitable, they put a lot of rules and restrictions on things, and so you couldn't use it as much. When I was first starting out, I started putting calls to action at the bottom of all my articles.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of all my articles, I would then send them to what's called like a landing page. And I was getting about 20,000 emails every month just from people reading my article. Yeah. So people would read my articles, click my landing page, and it was just a page with basically one email. Like it's just like, hey, you can put your email in and you go get my free checklist on how to have a good morning routine. And I would get 20,000 emails a month for doing that. My reason for writing there, and that was with no paid advertising. I wasn't spending a dime. It was just like 1 million people would read my articles a month, and out of that, 20 to 25,000 people would give me their email.
Yeah.
Medium changed it, so they no longer allowed you to do that anymore. But I had already achieved my goal, and my goal was to get, honestly, a book deal. I wanted to get a book deal with one of the major 5, and so I needed at least 100,000 emails to do that. And so once I achieved my goal, Medium kind of stopped being as useful to me, and now it's not as good of a platform because they've changed all the rules, and they don't allow you to do calls to actions and stuff like that anymore. So it's not as useful to me anymore as it once was.
So do you then blog on your personal website and repost to Medium, or like what does your system look like at the moment?
At the moment, I'm trying to figure a lot of things out. I still use Medium because, you can still get page views there, and they've actually readjusted the rules so that you can actually get people to subscribe again, but they still they overly control the algorithms compared to what they did before. I use LinkedIn and I use my own personal blog. So I use all 3 of those. Then I'll put my blogs at places like Harvard Business Review or like Psychology A Day. So I'll still use other platforms, but the main ones that matter to me are ones that can transform readers into email subscribers.
Okay, I suppose that's kind of the bottom of the funnel thing, or initially the thing that you're optimizing for, and then once they're in your list, they are yours, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to do as well, because I've got a lot of people on the YouTube channel, but I've been kind of very casually and not very explicitly funneling people over to the email list for the last 2 years. I've been doing a weekly newsletter since April 2018. But I'm like every few months when I kind of look at the channel and where it's going, I always think, we should make more of a concerted effort to get people as email subscribers. Any advice on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say at the end of every article, or in this case, at the end of every video, you should have a clear call to action. It's a lot easier if you have one call to action because you don't want to create decision fatigue for people. Yeah. I found if you give them 2 options, they're probably going to take none. So you should have just something that's super compelling for your audience that's like a free exclusive giveaway. For a long time, I was giving away an ebook. Actually, it was like this book. I had an ebook called Slipstream Time Hacking. And I gave that away, and it was weird. Once I switched over to a checklist, like an easy checklist, and I've watched your videos, like very practical. You give and so rather than giving a full ebook, because that feels like it's a high pressure or like time consumer, just like seriously like a 5-page checklist that will give them whatever result they're looking for. Send them to a landing page,
It's like the basic stuff that you would do as a writer.
I can give you the landing page I used. It's called Peak State Checklist. It's called Peak State Checklist. You could look it up. It still exists. Over 720,000 people have given me their emails on that page. So that it's just you can't even scroll up or down. It's super easy. Do you see it, the blue page?
I see the PDF of Peak State Checklist.
Okay, so if you go to peakstatechecklist.com.
Oh yes, download checklist.
So literally. Over 720,000 people have put their email into that page. And it's just that simple. And so if you just send people to that link consistently, but whatever giveaway would work for you, I would just say consistency.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing with the YouTube algorithm is that it rewards your videos if they are keeping people on the platform for longer. So people often say that you don't actually want to get people onto your website or your mailing list from a video. You would rather they watch
Stay
another
here.
video and stay on
Yeah.
YouTube, and then the algorithm recommends your video. So it's kind of that balance between at what point do I want to kind of make the plug for my for my thing. But I think it's definitely
And
worth.
would it hurt you if you had just had it in all of your videos, like in like the information, where it was just like, if you just said
Yeah.
like, here's a free giveaway, and just it was in the link there, so that every time they saw it, there was just a link to it. You know what I mean?
That
It
would
wasn't
be
overly overblown.
Yeah, that would be very doable. That's how we get most of our email subscribers, because I just have a thing in the video description saying sign up to my weekly newsletter. But it's not like a lead magnet.
Yeah, if it just said get my free 5-page checklist on X right here, and it's just in every one with a link to a landing
To
page
landing
like the one
page.
I'm showing you. You know what I mean?
That could actually work really well. That's a very good idea.
Don't send them to your website. Like one thing I found is
Yeah.
because websites usually have multiple options, right? Like they can read about you, they can contact you, they can read your old blogs or see your old videos. Like the cool part about that landing page, there's one option. Either they give you their email or they leave, and usually they're there for less than 3 seconds. You know what I mean? So
So they make the
you want
decision.
you want the
Get
decision
back
to be
to the
quick.
video. Interesting. And then do you? So at the moment for my weekly newsletter, I have like an open rate of sort of 60%, 65%, or thereabouts. Do you think that this would be diluted by targeting an audience that is not explicitly there only for the newsletter, but has actually put their email address in just to get a copy of the lead magnet?
Yes. You would have especially if your numbers went up. Usually if you're above 100,000 email subscribers, you'd be stoked to have like a 20 to 25% open rate, and yeah, it would dilute your email list for sure.
Okay.
You might have to break it into segments where it's like, these are the strong people who like love all your videos, and these are the people who got the checklist, and like you might need to warm them up. So yeah, you might have to break up your email list, and your open rates and click rates would drop for
Okay.
sure.
Do open rates and click rates actually matter though, like in the grand scheme of things, in your experience?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't worry about them. I'd still try to grow your email list, but yeah, I think that they matter. I still try to provide lots of value to my email list. I mean, my email list is, at the moment it's like 320,000, and it's got an open rate of like 20% and a click rate of like 4. And so like I try to like keep, strengthening it, purging it often, and continuing to grow it.
Which platform do you host it on?
I use ConvertKit.
Ah, that would be.
What do you use?
I use Review at the moment, but I'm in the process of switching over to Ghost, which I use for my blog as well. I always look at ConvertKit and then my eyes water at the pricing. It's just so
It
expensive.
stinks. I'm actually dealing with some struggles with ConvertKit, so I might actually be want your advice on Ghost.
Yeah, Ghost. Yeah, annoyingly, Ghost's pricing is very similar to ConvertKit's, but I use it for my blog anyway, and so I'm thinking that for email newsletters, we can just publish it as kind of like under the email kind of tag for the blog, and then it just kind of sends out as a newsletter. So it's something we're experimenting with. So what sort of emails do you send to your list? Have you got like a weekly newsletter, or what's the vibe?
I send emails probably 3 times a week on a typical basis, usually with just an article. One of the things that I learned, which I wish I'd learned a long time ago, is to use what Dean Jackson, he's a marketing mastermind guy. He has a concept he calls the super signature, which is basically a PS at the bottom of every one of your emails that just sends people to a call to action. So you could send them to a webinar, you could send them back to your YouTube channel, but one of the things, so I'll send an email a few times a week with just an article, but there will be a PS now, and I'm, at this point, I've very simplified my funnel where I have a single future self program. I've actually even turned my whole website, Benjamin Hardy, into that funnel, where I'm giving away a free online course. But yeah, so at the bottom of all my emails there's a PS, did you get my free future self program yet? And, I did, for a long time, I never had that PS. It was just giving people my articles, but by having that PS, it's just like, you never know who's going to open the email that week. And so I missed out on a lot of things for years by just not having a PS and sending people to where I wanted them to go.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It's crazy.
Because like for my newsletters, I almost never have a call to action. It's just like, here are some fun things I saw this week, and here's a link to this fantasy audiobook that I was listening to on Audible, or here's a link to Seth Godin's blog post that I enjoyed this week.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that they love that, but if there was one if there's got to be one next step you're trying to take people to. So like I'm very confident that the one major step that anyone who comes in contact with a blog of mine or even this video is like, there's one step. I want them into my free future self program, because if they're in that, they're more likely to buy this, they're more likely to buy my other stuff. And so there has to be one clear destination that you take everyone to.
Yeah.
And so the more times you invite different audiences to that, hopefully your own audience, at least consistently, to the next clear step in your progression with them.
Okay.
That's the helpful thing.
So what does your funnel look like at the moment? So you get people in at the top for this free future self thing. How does that work?
It's a 30-day program just based on Personalize and Permanent, the book. Just teaches them all the science on how to frame and become their desired future self. It's a 30-day program, and it hopefully sells them on this book. What's interesting is, I don't know if you've studied the idea of like indirect effects, but like usually it's weird. Like I studied Stephen R. Covey for a long time. Stephen Covey wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I've even become friends with the guy who helped sell his books. He sold over 30 million copies of that book. And he said that it was weird that it was easier to sell the book if people were going through their program. For a long time, they had like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People in like schools and corporations. And so when people went through the corporate training, they would buy the book. So that's an indirect effect. Rather than just buying the book, they would rather, they would buy the book if they went through the corporate training. And so I designed this 30-day Future Self program to lead people to ultimately buy the book, because my major goal is honestly to sell copies of that book. I want people to read it. Okay. But the next step for me is, I have a $1,000 AMP program. I don't want to do any live coaching, any personal coaching. Like I just don't want to spend time one-on-one. I prefer one-to-many.
Yeah.
And so, I have one major program that I sell in my 30-day Future Self program is kind of a feeder. It feeds to the 2 things that I want, which is selling books and then getting people into that bigger course. Sick. And so the only thing I'm trying to get people to do is go through that Future Self program. And it has to be super good though. Yeah. It's like, it has to be, and you obviously, I watch your content. Your content, the stuff you give away for free is so good. And so you just kind of it has to be that good or better.
Okay. And is your 30-day program, is it like a 30 email sequence, or what does the program look like?
Create the sequence. It sends and everyone can do this different, but it sends an email, and unfortunately I have to use ClickFunnels. In this case, I have ClickFunnels and Kajabi, but Kajabi can't handle this because of the volume of people I'm trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And so, every day they'll get an email from ConvertKit that just sends them to the next training, and then they'll go to ClickFunnels. They'll watch the training. It's like, 8 to 10 minutes long with a few challenges, and then the next day they'll get the next email.
Oh, okay. So it's an email plus videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Damn,
and with challenges,
30 of them.
like literally they get 30 emails, and each one comes with a training. I mean, it's a deep dive course. I mean, there's hours of content.
Yeah, and you're giving it all away for free.
Totally. And I think I've sold it in the past for hundreds of dollars, but I just decided to make it free because the more people I can get through that, the more people I can get to do my ultimate goals. And so, if you've got something really good that is like the clear next step in the funnel, and it's really important for motivation, obviously, to have just one outcome that you're leading people to, and ultimately to have one outcome you're leading yourself to. And so it's just like, we just point everyone to that. Anyone who emails me, my assistant says, hey, have you taken Ben's 30-day Future Self program? I'm now hiring someone on my social media team where they're just literally going to email or private message everyone in my social media and anyone who engages with anything of mine on social media, hey, are you in Ben's Future Self program? Like, we're just pointing everyone to that one thing. Because that thing becomes the ultimate funnel to my actual goals, which is to sell books and to make money.
Oh, incredible. Okay, I definitely need to take this program. A, because I feel it would help me, but B, to give me some ideas about what I can do.
Well, I know you got a book deal, and so you just gotta ask yourself, what is your goal? What is the thing you're actually trying to? And maybe it's just to grow the heck out of this YouTube channel. So like, what's the thing that you could do that would point as many people to this channel as possible? I don't know where you're ultimately trying to lead people, but you should have one tool that leads people to exactly where you want them to be.
Okay. Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and that was something I wanted to talk to you about, because I read in some of your articles you talk about this kind of having one goal, having one outcome. And for me, I'm not really sure what my one goal or one outcome should be. And I also, there's a big part of me that fights against this idea of having a goal, because it feels like, well, 1 million subscribers by this date. It's not in my control. It's just a recipe for unhappiness. Once I hit that goal, the goalposts change. All of the stuff associated with this idea of be satisfied with where you are. Don't worry about the goals thing. I don't know how you think about that.
It sounds like you've been reading too much James Clear. I'm just kidding.
James Clear, Jason Fried, Naval, they all seem to rail against the goal vibe.
Well, the problem, in my opinion, is 2 things. Philosophy and psychology argue against them. So in philosophy, there's a concept called teleology. And basically, it's the idea that every human action is to create an end. So like you and I right now, we're both actually trying to create an outcome. we're having a conversation, which might be just the outcome is for us to learn from each other, or it might be to produce this video. But both, and I know we're both having this conversation for an outcome.
Okay.
Even if I went to the bathroom, it would be to create an outcome. You know what I mean? Even if I went to get a drink, it would be to create an outcome.
Sure.
And so every human behavior is to produce an end. In psychology, it's called prospection. But basically, prospection is the idea that the thing that makes us conscious human beings is that we can imagine a future. Like the only reason I can make conscious decisions is because I can project what the future outcomes of those could be. And so if I didn't visualize the future and where my behaviors would go, all my behavior would be reactive, probably like animals and plants. And so what makes my decision making powerful is that I can imagine the future that it's going to create. And then I can use whatever future I want to dictate what I do now. And so it's kind of, I get the idea that goals can be limiting, but the idea is that everything you do is to create an outcome anyways. And so why don't you just be honest about what the outcome is that you want? You know what I mean? Like, just say, this is what I want. This is what I'm going for. It's okay if I don't. I mean, you can do whatever you want psychologically to make yourself feel better if you either achieve it or don't. But the point is just to be honest and blunt that, motivation is a lot more easily created if you're clear about the outcome you want and if you're explicit about it. And flow is a lot easier if you're just focused on one thing at a time, And so for me, it's like, I just want to be with you right now. I'm just going to have this conversation, and I know I'm going to be in a flow state. And I think if you're just clear, like, all right, you just got a book deal. So like whatever it is you're trying to do to accomplish that, the more you focus on the one outcome you're going to create, the more easy flow is going to be for you. So I think the whole argument against goals goes against human nature, to be fully honest with you.
Okay. And so for you, how important is it that goal be quantifiable and have a time frame and, smart goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, as opposed to something like, I just want to grow my YouTube channel, which is not a good goal?
Yeah, I think you would come up with better processes. You'd come up with better ways of doing things if you had constraints, like if it could be measurable, if it was something that your brain could actually focus on, so like if you wanted to get 5 million YouTube subscribers in the next 6 months, I'm not saying it's possible, although for some people it has been possible, but if you give yourself usually a bigger goal, a goal that's, Dan Sullivan would say 10 times bigger goals are actually easier than 2 times bigger because they require you to think outside the box on how you would do it. You'd have to think laterally, but yeah, I think if you give it a quantifiable, thing and you give yourself an outcome, I think being okay if it doesn't happen is one thing, but it allows you to think creatively about how you could get it done. Because in psychology, motivation and hope require 3 things. Like you need, for hope and for motivation, you need a clear outcome, you need the belief that you can do it, and then you need a pathway. There's this concept called pathways thinking to get there. And so part of giving yourself like a deadline is that it forces you to find a pathway. It forces, so if I were to require you to get 5 million YouTube channel subscribers in the next 6 months, and then you were to report your progress to me on a weekly basis, and you then strategize with people who already have 20 or 30 million email subscribers, let's just say, or YouTube, that you would start to think of unique ways about going about your work that you're not currently doing. So I just think it's effective for finding pathways, and I don't need to get all upset if I don't achieve my goal. I just want better strategies for achieving my goals.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, I think the thing that the anti-goal brigade, which includes me, says is that the act of setting a goal puts you into this state of unhappiness because until you achieve that goal, you are not satisfied. But I guess what you're saying is, we're not that dumb. We can, hold the idea of a goal in our brains while not being crushed by the fact that I haven't yet got 5 million subscribers.
Yeah, my major goal is to, sell millions of copies of this book, but that does not make me unhappy in the present. And actually, Dan Sullivan has a antidote for this as well. He calls it Measure the Gain, Not the Gap. And it's an ebook I would recommend everyone read. It's free. He gives it away. But basically, he says, rather than measuring yourself against your ideal, you measure yourself against your former self. You measure yourself against where you were. So if you measured yourself against where you were 3 months ago, you probably have made progress towards whatever goal you've made. And if you're measuring yourself against your former self rather than your future self, then you're always going to be recognizing progress and you're always going to be feeling good. So I personally, if I look back on where I was at 3 months ago, I've made huge progress. Therefore, I'm feeling pretty amazing about myself, even though I haven't achieved my goal yet. And just because I haven't gotten to where I want to be doesn't mean I have to be sad in the present. I
Yeah.
think that that's like that is a false nomer. Like that's
Yeah.
that is not required.
Okay.
It does give me purpose though. I mean, even Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning,
Mm.
he said that if you don't have a purpose towards your future, then your present lacks meaning. Like, he talked about the people in the concentration camps. He said those who lost hope and purpose towards a specific future, their present lost meaning and purpose. It lost context. And so you kind of need a future that you're stretching and striving for. He said that what man needs is not a tensionless state, but the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, which is a freely chosen task. No one imposed it upon you but you. You chose it. But it gives you something to stretch and struggle for. It gives you something to actually get out of bed for.
Yeah, so that was one thing that about a month ago I quit my full-time job of being a doctor, and I started this kind of journey of unemployment for at least a year to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I listened to the audiobook of Man's Search for Meaning, I think in week one of unemployed life.
And you
Because
hated it, right? I'm just kidding.
no, I really liked it actually. It's a good book. But the thing that I was really worried about is kind of what is going to be my reason to wake up in the morning if I don't have the day job to go to. And I haven't really had that be an issue in the last month because things have grown a lot on the YouTube front. Things have grown on the courses, the books, all of the other stuff associated with kind of the online thought leader business marketplace, which you're also in. And I kind of felt bad that I really don't miss medicine at all. But I know that I want it to be part of my life in some capacity at some point. And so yesterday I did a live stream with a friend of mine in the US who's a doctor there. And we were talking about kind of motivation behind, like, because I've been toying with the idea of moving to America to do my emergency medicine residency. And that feels like one of those things where there's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a lot of striving and toiling to be had in the process of getting there. And it's kind of nice having that as like a goal, because it does actually give my days more purpose, where I can spend like a couple of hours each day studying for this exam, and then I can do the sort of internet entrepreneurship stuff.
Yeah. I would say whatever you're doing in the present is based on your views of the future. That's kind of where psychology has gone. Like, and so if it's going and being a doctor in the US, or if it's growing your YouTube channel, or if it's writing this next book, the fact is that, this is what's really cool in my opinion about where psychology has gone. For 100 years, it was the idea that your past is driving your present. Now, the idea is the opposite. It's actually your view of your future that's driving your present. So whatever, everything you're doing right now is, in my opinion, to achieve goals, even if you're not admitting that they're goals. Even if you don't want to call them goals, you're getting up to produce YouTube videos,
Yeah.
And so to me, those would be called goals. But what's, in my opinion, more exciting about that is the idea that you get to choose the future that directs your present. And that's called living consciously. And so, I think, I'm not like, you have to set goals, blah, blah, blah. But in my opinion, every behavior is driven by an outcome. And so whether you call it goals or not, your behavior is to produce something.
Yeah, I guess so. So how have you got any ways for thinking about like what do you actually want? Because like the thing that I've been kind of struggling with, and struggling is a strong word, but ever since kind of the age of like 17, when I read the 4 Hour Work Week for the first time, I'd had this kind of dream of like, oh, multiple sources of passive income, financial independence, blah blah blah. Discovered like the whole financial independence community, Mr. Bunny Mustache, all that stuff. Be like, okay, cool, this is a thing. I want to get to a point where medicine is optional for me, and I'll probably still do medicine for fun because it's kind of cool, kind of fun to do it part time. But I want it to be optional. And now I'm at the point where medicine is optional, and I'm thinking, what is the next? Like, where does the meaning now come from? Like, is it just more sources of income that I'm looking for? Like what's the thing? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about, because again, in my opinion, our behavior is driven by our goals, even if you don't call them goals. For a long time, you wanted to be a doctor, and so that was driving your behavior. Then at some point, you read the 4 Hour Work Week, and you decided you didn't want to be tied to a job, or some information and input came into your mind and gave you the idea that you no longer wanted to be tied to a 9 to 5 or something. And so our goals in a lot of ways are based on the information we have. Like, again, that goes back to my 3 foster kids. They were limited by the information that they had. When you expose them to new and better information, they can then set new and better desires. So like Charlie Trotter, the famous chef in Chicago, he was one of the first like really famous fine dining chefs. He would regularly bring in homeless kids into his restaurant and let them eat there. And he got criticized for that because people were like, you're creating unrealistic expectations for these kids. And he's like, no, I'm actually trying to expand their mind so that they can actually see that there's a different world out there. So I think constantly learning is one way of finding better pursuits or choosing what you want. Because I think the question was, how do I decide what I want?
Yeah.
So I think you have to constantly learn and have new experiences and expose yourself to new things so that you can ultimately make informed decisions, because your current self is limited by what you know. You can only set the goals based on what your current awareness is. But also I think you actually can train your desires. In my opinion, desire isn't necessarily innate, but it's trained. I can train myself to want to exercise. I can train myself to want to binge watch YouTube. Like you train everything you repeat, you start to want to do more. And so you can actually question your current desires and ask yourself, maybe you should want something better. One of the things that the research it shows is that you actually want to view your future self as a different person. Your future self isn't you. They're going to want different things than you want. They're going to be in a different situation. They're going to be dealing with different problems. So you could ask yourself, well, what would they want? Because maybe what you want right now isn't what's in best interest to your future self. But I think I think it's constant learning from multiple sources and ultimately deciding what's useful and valuable for you.
Yeah, I guess because kind of pre 4-hour work week, I guess the only model I had for what a life looks like was all of the doctors around me and my parents be like, okay, I guess I'm going to become a doctor then. That sounds reasonable. And you don't realize that there is this whole other world out there. And then you listen to the right podcast or watch the right YouTube videos, read the right books, and suddenly the box expands the kind of realm of possibility for what you can do. And then after I read Vagabonding by Rolf Potts, suddenly it was like, oh, I could just travel the world if I want to. Okay, cool. And then a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a guy who is an emergency medicine physician, and he worked on a cruise ship for 5 years, like literally traveling the world, working 2 hours a day, just doing a clinic for all the old people on the cruise ship. I was like, oh, that's a possibility. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it's exposing yourself to more and more of those things. I mean, I never even knew what organizational psychology was until I went to China, because in my undergrad, there was just never emphasized. They emphasized clinical psychology, but I went to China for a few weeks with my wife, and I met this guy who was the full-on trainer of Apple over Asia, and he was explaining to me his job, and I was like, holy cow, like, how do I get your job? I love that. And he's like, well, my boss got his master's in IO psychology. I'm like, I've never even heard of that before. So like, I think you just need to constantly be exposing yourself, because like right now you're limited by what you know, just like your former self was limited by what they knew, And so you are different from who you were pre 4-hour work week, right?
Yeah.
And you now make decisions that are different than your former self would have made, because you now have different information and understanding and different level of confidence. Just like your future self will as well. So it's false to assume that your future self will make the same decisions your current self will, because your future self hopefully has better information and maybe more refined priorities.
Okay. Is there something that I've heard said then, given that the future is so uncertain, the best thing we can do right now is to just kind of keep our options as open as possible, so that when the future comes around and our future self then has the context of that time to figure out actually what they want to do. And you want to do stuff that doesn't necessarily tie you into doing a thing for a very extended period of time.
I some degree disagree.
Okay.
I wouldn't say you want to keep all your options open. I think at some point you've got to make decisions and cut off alternative options. Like one of my favorite quotes comes from Robert Brault, and he said that we're kept from our goal not by obstacles, but by clear paths to lesser goals.
Ooh.
So we're kept from our goal not by the obstacles between us and our goal, but by clear paths to lesser goals. That's keeping other options open that are, maybes. I think that by removing, the true definition of decision is remove options. And that doesn't mean you remove them all at once, but I think, you commit more to what you really want by removing alternative options. And to me, that actually decreases what's called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is basically the idea that you're still weighing options. It's like tabs on a computer, you know? By closing a tab and saying, I'm no longer going to think about that anymore, like I've eliminated that option, you actually free up space in your brain and have more willpower to make better decisions, because you're no longer burning out your hard drive, or I guess your willpower. So decision fatigue will burn you out if you don't make certain decisions. And you build your confidence by eliminating options and saying, I'm going to go more and more towards this way.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
And
'cause
Fried, your guy Jason Fried, by the way, says he's intent, and Tim Ferriss
yeah.
talk a lot about strategic ignorance, about not being aware of many things because you honestly don't want to be aware of a lot of the options because you know that they're just going to derail you anyways. So there's a lot to be said about removing options and being strategically ignorant about a lot of things.
Okay. So I guess it's a balance between that and exposing yourself to enough possibilities and way of life that you can sort of make some sort of decision about where you actually want to go, rather
Yeah,
than yeah,
I think it's increasing the quality of the decision opportunities. Like right now, your current self has a lot more freedom than your former self had.
yeah.
And so the types of options you could weigh are different from the types of options you could have weighed 2 or 3 years ago. You have more freedom, you have more flexibility. You've put yourself in an amazing situation where you have more time. You probably have more money. You have more network. You've got the ability to connect. So your ability to make decisions right now is fundamentally different from your ability to make decisions in the past. So I think you've created freedom, but at the same, and so I guess you could say you do have options, but I also say that you probably have eliminated various things that you're no longer willing to do.
Yes, definitely. I think so. For the last couple of months, kind of this one goal that I've sort of been toying with is this kind of go to America, do the residency, do the USMLEs, do all the medical exams, blah 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 blah. And the thing that is sort of I can sense it sort of sucking away my motivation is the fact that
Yep.
I actually don't have to do that. I could just
Yeah.
churn out videos on the internet, travel the world, become like a full-time productivity guru, but it just feels a little bit less satisfying. But I kind of know in the back of my mind that why am I sitting here learning glycogen storage disorders that I'm never going to need to know outside of this exam when I could be, I don't know, in Bali sipping a cocktail on a beach, kind of just making a video for 4 hours a week.
Well, it seems like it's possible that your whole, sometimes you have to question the desires of your former self. Why did you decide to be a doctor in the first place? Given what you know now, do you have to want that anymore? Like, see, I actually had to face a hard reality, even just like 2 days ago, where it became painfully obvious to me that what I had wanted for a decade is now something I maybe should stop wanting.
Okay.
That there was this goal that I had in my mind that my former self had placed a lot of meaning on, that now, based on where I'm at in my current situation, I no longer have to give it the same meaning. That's actually a fundamental way of reframing trauma, is changing the meaning of former experiences. But you can also, maybe being a doctor is what you wanted for a long time for various reasons, but you don't have to have the same reasons your former self had. Or, you could look to your future self and you could ask yourself, who do you really want to be in 20 years from now? Like, is becoming a productivity guru going to help you get where you ultimately want to be? Or is being a doctor and going big in that going to help you get there? So I think you kind of have to weigh both sides. Like, you don't have to want what you formerly wanted, but at the same time, you should ask yourself, where do you truly want to be?
Yeah. I guess that's the.
But you could let go. I mean, it's possible that you want to be a doctor still because of some meaning that you gave to something your parents said 20 years ago, and you're still kind of holding on to that, even though I'm not saying you do,
Sure.
but I'm just saying it's sometimes relieving to realize I don't have to want that anymore. Maybe I'm actually doing something that's better. Like, I'll just be honest. For a long time, I actually wanted to write more spiritual style books. Like, I went and served a humanitarian mission at age like 20, and it was really helpful for me in getting over a lot of the trauma from my past. And so I thought when I was going to be an author that I was going to write more spiritual style books. Yeah. I then studied psychology, went into business and stuff
and
like
became
that.
a guru.
I wouldn't call myself that, but it's interesting in looking at some of the former mentors that I had, or some of the former idols that I had that wrote more in the spiritual realm that I thought, and I was looking at them and just realizing, for all these years I've wanted to do what they do, and now I realize that I don't know if I want it anymore. Maybe I'm actually doing something that is more useful or better. And I realize that a lot of the people who are doing what I wanted to be doing are actually wishing that they could be doing what I'm already doing. And so I just kind of realized, wow, like, maybe that goal that I've had for this last decade isn't even what I should want anymore.
Yeah. And
I guess your current self has the ability to make different decisions than your former self. And so you have that potential.
Yeah. And I guess, this will make me think
You have
a lot.
information that you didn't used to have, right?
Yeah.
And so you can now know, maybe it's okay to let go of that goal based on what you currently know. You know
Mm.
things your former self didn't know. You don't have to give the same meaning to being a doctor as you once did. Or maybe you can give different meaning. Maybe you can give better meaning. I don't know. But it doesn't have to mean the same thing to current you as it did to former you, because you now know things your former self didn't know.
Yeah, and I guess like in a hypothetical universe where I was going to shed that identity of being a doctor, it feels like it would be a big thing, right? Because this is something that you've worked for a long time to get to. It's you kind of plastered everywhere on the internet. I sometimes wonder, and my brother often challenges me about this. To what extent am I thinking I need to be a doctor just because I'm lacking imagination, or because I'm kind of looking into the void of I can do anything with my life, and oh, there's too many options. Let's just go for medicine because that's the thing that I know and that's the thing that I've been doing in the past.
I'm thinking about two things. There's two thoughts that come
Mm.
to my mind when you're telling me. One is opportunity cost. So you've already, or sunk cost bias. You've already invested years of your life into this thing, and so it's kind of like when you're halfway through a crappy movie. Sometimes you just finish
Mm.
because you already invested that into it. Whereas it's better if you realize
Yep.
halfway through the movie that it's not a good movie, just to get rid of it, just like halfway.
Yeah.
So sunk cost bias could be a thing that's driving you, is that you've already invested so much into it. It's why
Mm.
some people stay in bad relationships, is because they've already invested. But the other one is a quote from Condoleezza Rice. And she said, "I firmly believe you should never spend any of your time being the former anything. Never be the former anything." So as an example,
Mm.
Buzz Aldrin, who was one of the first astronauts to go to space, when he went back to the moon, when he went to the moon and he came back, he went on a bender, and he ended up spending the next 18 years of his life flushing them down the toilet. He lost his job. He lost his career with NASA. He got divorced, and he said that the reason for that is because he no longer had a view of his future. He kept being the guy who was the guy who went to the moon. Um, and so I like Condoleezza Rice's statement that you should never be the former anything, because you shouldn't really worry so much about who you were. It's like, for me, for example, I shouldn't really worry that much about the fact that I was the top writer at Medium for 3 years, because to me that has nothing to do with my current goals. That helped me get here, but what got me here won't get me there. And so if I focus so much on my former identity or my former persona, that actually stops me from having imagination towards my future self.
Okay. We've talked about a lot about kind of wanting and goals and stuff. Where does the kind of sentiment of generally being satisfied with where you are, like where does that kind of fit into your kind of mental model of in kind of goals and that sort of stuff?
I mean, I think that creating a lot of meaning in your life. I mean, we can. I think that has a lot to do with flow.
Okay.
Wherever you are, that's where you should be. So
Mm.
like for me, for example, I'm having incredible satisfaction having this
Mm.
conversation with you. Like to me, flow is generated by being where you are. And by being happy with where you are. So like for me, the one thing that I'm trying to do right now is just be with you. When I go home, I literally have 5 kids,
Mm.
and so I think that there's a lot of joy in just being with them and making their lives better, but also in appreciating the difference between where we are and where we were a few years ago. Like you actually get a lot of joy in measuring your current self from your former self. So like my kids, for example, like my oldest son is 12, and we adopted our 3 oldest kids. But watching him play tennis versus like where he was at 3 months ago, because we give him a lot of tennis, it's mind blowing. And so, I get the idea of fully being present, but it's actually difficult to appreciate the present without the context of the past or the future.
Okay.
And so I live in the present a lot, and I think I try to measure, joy as well. Like, I mean, I think for me, joy is measured just in moment, in peak experiences, and then also in just being present. And so, I mean, I strive for that, and I strive for just. I guess the idea is just wherever you are, that's where you should be. If I'm
Okay.
with my kids, I turn off my phone, I turn off my work, and I'm just creating one outcome, which is be with them. If I'm at work, it's just create one outcome. So for me, the goal is flow, and I think when you're in flow a lot, you experience a lot of joy. And flow is not destroyed by having goals. Actually, flow is increased by having goals.
Okay.
So for me, the goal is flow.
Yeah.
I like the idea of satisfaction and peace and stuff like that. But I
Mm.
think flow satisfies all of those things.
Okay. So like for example, for me, the like a goal might be I don't know, I want to have this $1 million house in this city, and that's fine, but the way of getting there would be to create value that's monetizable, etc., etc., and doing that would actually get me into the flow state. So even though I've got it as a goal, the fact that the gap between now and the goal is not infringing on my satisfaction in the here and now, because my satisfaction in the here and now is contingent on having flow, which benefits from having a goal.
Well,
If that makes sense.
you, think about it this way. It's very difficult to direct your attention if you don't have a direction for that attention. The goal gives you something to direct your flow towards, right? So if you want to actually make money, and if that is your outcome that you really want, is to get $1 million house, that then gives your brain something to focus on for the next 6 to 12 months or 3 years or whatever it is. Being in flow is not, and also peak experiences. Peak experiences and flow are very similar concepts. Peak experiences are where your mind becomes expanded.
Okay.
But flow doesn't just naturally happen. It happens when you're actually doing something. So like my kid is going to get into flow a lot more, being in tennis lessons, enjoying tennis, but actually wanting to get better at tennis. He's going to get into flow a lot more. So having goals just provides you direction for something to give your attention to, but flow is the experience of actually being in that experience while you're doing it. So if I want to be a good dad, or even you becoming a doctor, me getting my PhD, you writing this book that you got a book deal for, you need to accomplish that book. So that's giving you something to actually draw your attention towards. You're going to have to research and write the book, or have someone else write the book for you, but it actually gives you something to have flow in. You're going to have flow for the next 12 months writing a book. And that's because you've now given yourself this outcome of creating a book. So the goal just gives you something to experience flow towards.
Nice. What do you mean by peak experiences? Like, you say peak experiences equals experiences that expand the mind. Are we talking like psychedelics? Are we talking like reading the 4-Hour Workweek? Like, what's an experience that expands the mind?
I think both of those would fit that category. So peak experiences, there's that quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., a mind that is stretched by a new idea can't go back, or a mind that is stretched by a new experience can't go back. Peak experiences are just moments. It could be awe, could be humility, it could be just moments that kind of reshape your perception a little bit, helps you change the meaning. It could help you to see things with a fresh eye. It could help you to have a new goal. When you read the 4-Hour Workweek, it sounded to me like that was a peak experience because it changed your view of your own future.
Yeah.
It changed what was possible for you. The Charlie Trotter experience that I'm talking about with those kids that he brought in, the impoverished kids, to me, I think that some of them probably had a peak experience there. Maybe someone who's listening to this is having a peak experience where they're now seeing new possibilities for themselves, and they're reframing meanings of former things. And so you want to rate, that's why I think learning and exposing yourself to new things, having cool conversations, but even just sitting and just changing how you view something. I mean, even yesterday, you can turn little things into peak experiences. Like right now, my wife, her mom, but also her sister are in town, because we live in Orlando, so people often come to go to Disney. And her sister has a little boy. Like, actually, her sister has 3 little kids under 4. And we have a bunch of kids, too. And so there are 5 kids under 4 years old at my house right now, trashing my house. And and this girl, my sister-in-law, has this little boy, 4 years old. The kid is just endless energy, just running all over the place, just, and the initial... And one of the ways to have peak experiences, honestly, is to question your initial reaction. Adam Grant talks about how wisdom is not believing everything you think, and emotional intelligence is not internalizing everything you feel. And so the initial reaction I had to this kid who was running all over the place was, dude, this sucks. Like, I'm going to have a week of this. But then you question your initial reaction, you question your initial thought, and you flip it. What if I thought the opposite? And I just started looking at the kid from a different perspective. And by just looking at one thing from a different perspective, I had a peak experience. I all of a sudden freaking loved the kid, and I was feeling all sorts of gratitude. And I was excited for him to have fun, and I didn't really care about the mess because I then looked at it from a different... So peak experiences can and should happen all the time, but kind of the idea is that they'll usually happen if you're intentional. They're probably not going to randomly happen. They happen when you're actually seeking something. You got to actually be seeking something to have more of those mind-stretching experiences. And I think that's probably why people actually take all, psychedelics, which I personally don't do. But I think that they're actually seeking something. They're trying to have some form of healing or they're actually seeking something, and they're not having a random experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something I've been itching to try, because like all of the Tim Ferriss, Sam Harris, like all of the tech people are all big on the psychedelic hype. Like, oh my god, you've got to try this. The thing that this reminded me of, kind of the way you kind of flipped the script in your head about this little, like 4-year-old kid running around. Seth Godin has a really nice blog post, have to versus get to. And I used to think about this at work so often. I'd be like, I have to do another blood or another cannula. And then I think, no, I get to. Being a doctor is a privilege. This is fun. And just that thought just actually magically changes. And I never thought it would be so easy to just flip the script, but it's a game changer.
that flip script is just as useful for reframing the past. Rather than saying this happened to me, you say this happened for me.
Oh,
So
nice.
any trauma, like literally my parents got divorced. Oh, that happened for me. Like that. Oh, my girlfriend dumped me. Oh, that happened for me. Rather than saying this happened to me, you frame it as, how did this happen for me? What are all the benefits? What can I now do because of this? And that allows you to reframe any trauma.
So on the note of reframing trauma, I read your something that you I think in personalities isn't permanent. There's a lot of stuff about reframing trauma. It reminded me of have you read The Courage to Be Disliked?
I have.
Yeah, and like the whole thing about there is no such thing as trauma, and anytime me or my brother, because we love that book, anytime we mention the trauma thing to people, it results in a very strong response. Oh, but trauma is definitely a thing. What about child abuse? What about this? What about that? I imagine you, as a proponent of reframing trauma, I imagine you get that a fair bit. Like, how do you respond to the criticism that, easy for you to say, I had a lot of trauma in my life.
I love that book, Courage to Be Disliked. In my opinion, trauma is a meaning, and so that's it's exactly reframing trauma. Yes, some things are a lot deeper than others because of their emotional impact, but it's the same process as what you and I just described as me flipping the script on that story with my kid. It's about looking, how memory works is that memory is always interpreted from the present. So if I interpret my past from my present self. Just like when culture changes, you then look at the past and history from the current culture's perspective. And so I just know that my views of the past are always going to change, and it's just up to me to choose the meaning. So yeah, I wouldn't actually say I get much flack, but I just think, in my opinion, trauma is a meaning, and you can change that meaning, and you can change it right now. You can choose to look at it from a different perspective. And if you really want to move forward, maybe get help getting a different perspective from someone else, but get a different perspective, because your current perspective is holding you back. It's stopping you in some way. And so from my perspective, it's just a meaning that you gave based on your initial reaction because of your emotions.
Yeah, that's something that Darren Brown talks about in Happy as well, which is one of my favorite books. He kind of talks about how it's all about stoicism for people in the audience who haven't read it, and he talks about how the whole thing about we can control our thoughts and our actions, and people say well, what about depression? What about this? An insert extreme example of situation here. And his point is that kind of even modern day cognitive behavioral therapy kind of relies on this idea that actually you really can't do anything about the past. All you can do is change the way that change the meaning that you attach to it. And so for some of us, it's as simple as flipping a script in our heads. For others, it might need a little bit more help with a professional, to talk through it over a course of weeks or months. But either way,
there's nothing wrong with that.
End goal is still the same of we're working towards flipping the script, however we get there.
Yeah. My take is there's two things human beings want: a bigger future and a better past. And you can change the past and have a lot more meaning. If you have a healthy version if you have a positive view towards your past, and if you have a big future that's exciting to you, your present's going to be very positive.
Okay, so throughout this chat, so far, you've been quoting an impressive number of like other people and other books and stuff, and I feel like, for example, if I'm on a podcast and it's sort of questions about stuff that I'm familiar with, like the creator stuff or the entrepreneur stuff, I will also kind of quote stuff in that way, and people always ask me, "Oh, how do you have such a memory for quotes?" I'm always like, I don't know. I guess I've just internalized the idea so much and the source of it that I know that in 4 Hour Workweek this is said, or Derek Sivers says this, or Ryan Holiday says that. Is that the case for you, or do you have like an external like note taking system? Do you think about having these like bits to call upon when you need to?
I don't, man. I mean, I'm a writer, and so usually I'll turn them into something, and usually when you write about them or you think about them, you remember them more. But I think that, memory is something you can improve upon. Memory is like the web. Have you ever studied mind mapping as an example? I know I've seen actually some of your videos, and you've turned like concepts into mind maps. And so, I think the more you can think about something and connect it to other things, the easier you can remember it. And honestly, if you're in a flow state, you remember things a lot easier. You just draw upon your subconscious a lot faster. So I think that, being in a good conversation leads to a lot faster memory access as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's a whole I don't know if you've come across the whole burgeoning field of personal knowledge management and stuff, phrases like building a second brain and stuff like that.
A little bit. I might not know as much as you. Give me some thoughts on it.
Yeah, so the idea of that is that, as David Allen says, our brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. And the idea is that we kind of want to outsource a lot of our thinking to a digital note-taking app like Notion or Roam or Evernote or whatever. The idea being that, we consume all of these different things. What we want to do is convert them into kind of our own words. And then we will kind of, in a way, want to rely on the app to make the connections for us. So, for example, if you were talking about personality, you would search your Evernote for personality, and it would just bring up all of the different things. And in theory, because of that process, you'll be able to make links that your first brain wouldn't have been able to do. And so, a big part of me kind of buys into this because I think it's kind of helped me churn out more content for my YouTube channel. But then I think like all of the actual insights that I've had, interesting connections I've made, have not been a result of a secondary note-taking system. They've actually just been sparked in my brain, and then I use the note-taking system to write that down. Yeah.
I like what you're saying. I'm more on board with what you've said on the second. I think it's definitely important to outsource, to have second brains. We all have many second brains, including other people. Sometimes you rely on like someone else, like who did they live? Who are they again?
Yeah.
But I think there's been a lot of research, for example, on like taxi drivers, right? And like once taxi drivers got GPSs, their memories literally like shrunk dramatically because they no longer knew their way around the environment. They relied too heavily on their second brain. And so I think that it's a healthy mix. You use technology, but if you overly use it, then all of a sudden your memory isn't as solid on the spot. So for me, I kind of like your method where it's like I'm constantly learning, and then I'll take really good notes that I can always go to, but I don't heavily rely upon them.
So what's your system? Have you got like a note-taking system for books, articles, podcasts, and things like that?
My systems are very basic, dude. I mean, I have just a regular journal. I write in it. It's not very sketchy, very ugly. I journal every single day, have for years. Loved journaling. Journaling is like my place for integrating my knowledge and also clarifying goals, clarifying my emotions and things like that. But okay. I think a lot of it's just about continuously learning and continuously teaching, whether that's in the form of writing or teaching as you are with your videos. I think that's just that leads you to the right information. That leads you to the right things to pursue and the things to deep dive on. So I'm guessing that, and I already know like the things that I would talk about today, if you had a conversation with me 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been a very different conversation. You know what I mean? I would have thought about a lot of different ideas then. So yeah, I think it's go ahead.
That's something that I often kind of advise people in my role as an internet guru that even if you have no interest in starting a YouTube channel or starting a blog, it is just kind of helpful to think about how you might share the stuff that you've learned, because when you're in sharing mode, it just changes the lens through which you view basically everything. So now, like the fact that I make these videos, or the fact that you're a writer, probably changes the way we interact with information. And I feel
you organize it probably immediately, right? In how you would explain it or something like that.
I think, this is interesting. This would make for a good video. Let's write that down. And the idea just forms. Whereas pre-YouTube channel and kind of pre the blog that I kind of tried to start in 2016, I was just like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And apart from very few things, peak experiences like the 4-hour work week, so few things kind of went through the lens of how am I going to share this idea.
Yeah, so I would say that what you just described is, in my opinion, the reason to have goals, is that it actually gives your brain something to process the information into. So like from even though you don't say that it's a goal for you to keep creating YouTube channels, it's just videos, it's just something you enjoy doing now. The fact that you do it regularly changes how you process information. Now whenever you process information, you think about it in the lens of how would I turn this into a video. And that, to me, that's why I love writing. Writing books or anything is that it changes how I process the world. It's always now being processed based on like the idea I'm currently pursuing through that book or whatever it gives your brain something different to process the world through.
Have you got a daily writing practice beyond the journaling?
At the moment, no. Usually it just has to do with the project I'm working on. Right now, so like my writing and my motivation are, maybe I just know too much about motivation and goals where I think that like it's impossible, but like for a long time, it was easy for me to crank out 300 articles in a year or like in 2 years because I really wanted to get 100,000 email subscribers because I wanted the book deal. Once I got the book deal, my writing was all around writing the books. So basically right now I'm in the midst of getting about 2 or 3 different book contracts because I'm doing multiple co-authorships and also writing my own book. And so once those book deals solidify, then I'll have something specific to write. But in the meantime, I'm actually finishing that Future Self program. And once that's created and I'll have this epic funnel, then I'll be motivated to actually go back to blogging a lot because I'll have somewhere to send those bloggers to.
Yes.
And so for me, intention really matters because I've watched a lot of people, for example, people who are writing on Medium, even 5 years ago, they're still banging away hundreds of blog posts. And good for them because they're really enjoying the process.
Yeah.
But to me, they haven't not gotten better because their process isn't being translated into something. Just like, because you're in YouTube mode, you process your information through YouTube. If you don't, in my opinion, if you don't have something you're trying to accomplish, you're not processing your information to achieve that goal. And so for me, I was really clear, like, I'm going to write to get that book deal. Yeah. Once I got the book deal, I'm going to write the books. Now that so for me, my writing's all about what's it targeted towards. Yeah. So I'm excited to write the next couple books, and also excited. I'll get back to blogging and finding a way because I'm now got this Future Self program and a reason to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I still enjoy it. I can hear maybe the inside of you or maybe the insides of others saying, well, but don't you just enjoy writing? And the truth is I do, but I like to always push the next level. Like for me, the next book I hope is better than the last one. But I do write just to write, but I guess to me it's more enjoyable if there's an aim to that writing. There's something I'm actually trying to do that's beyond what I've currently done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like that's kind of how I think about the YouTube thing and like the satisfaction that comes from it, because as you know, from the whole like motivation comes from having these small successes. And when it comes to a YouTube channel, you really see the immediate feedback loop. If you release a video, you get nice comments, the subscriber count goes up. It's so satisfying. And so when you have that to work towards, the motivation to churn out the videos week after week just kind of sustains itself. And yeah, certainly when I started the email newsletter and kind of sharing links that I enjoyed and writing a mini blog post for it each week, it just having that goal, even though I didn't call it a goal because goal's bad. Having that goal did change the way that I was processing everything else. One thing I was going to ask you, so if you hypothetically won the lottery and did not have to worry about money in the slightest, to what extent would your goals change?
They would. Yeah. I don't know how much they would change. Definitely. So like right now, I wouldn't say that the goals themselves would change, but my process for those goals would change immediately. I would, if I had unlimited money, I would just pour millions of dollars into ads and other things to sell copies of this book, rather than going on podcasts.
Yeah.
I would probably still do podcasts because I actually love this. But my method for achieving my goals would change dramatically. If I had unlimited money. You know what I mean?
Okay. So why is it a goal to sell more copies of the book? Is it because you want the ideas to get in people's hands? Or
I would say it would two. Yeah. One is I genuinely believe that this book will change people's lives. Two is, it also totally increases my opportunities in the future. Like if I were to sell millions of copies of this book, first off, my family would be financially set for a long period of time. I am providing for a family, and so selling books matters for me financially. It would set me up for the future. And yeah, so I mean, I do have financial reasons to sell the books, just like I have reasons to want to improve the heck out of people's lives. So I would say it's both. And but yeah, but if I had all the money in the world, my motive would still be to sell the book. Yeah. I would just do it in different ways, and I would probably do it a lot faster and more effectively.
Okay. Cool.
Or maybe I do it less effectively because I burn through the money.
Who knows? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a question that I enjoy asking people that I meet. That if you won the lottery, would you still kind of do what you're currently doing? And I used to ask it a lot as at work to kind of more senior doctors, and around half of them would say I would leave medicine completely, and the other half would say I'd still do medicine because it's fun, but I would do it part time. And that was I always thought was such a telling response.
You know what's interesting is I've heard the idea that, and this has to do with productivity,
Mm,
and it obviously comes from a certain worldview, but the idea is that work should be quality time and family should be quantity time, and it doesn't have to be family, it could
mm,
be hobbies or things like that, but you want to get really good at productivity, 80/20, etc., so that, or just applying yourself so that when you're working, you're in flow so that you can accomplish, let's just say, as much in an hour as maybe someone else could in a week. So that your work time is quality time, hyper focused, so that you have the quantity time to do whatever it is else you want. And I think that a lot of people think that they need money to create that, and money could help,
mm.
but a lot of times money creates more problems. If I won the lottery, I'd stick a lot of it into marketing that, and I would stick almost all of it towards retirement, and I would retire. But I would still keep writing books. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I have enough money to do that.
Yeah, I guess there was something. Have you come across a guy called Paul Millard?
No.
So he was in management consulting for like 10 years, and now he writes a newsletter and blogs about kind of this idea of workism and how we're all trying to rail against corporate America's obsession with like, what do you do, and are you a worker, and being defined by your job. And he tweeted a good thing that I read yesterday, which is that increasingly it seems like the the whole point is to just find something you enjoy and then find a way to keep doing the thing that you enjoy. So you enjoy the writing, and even if you had unlimited money, you would still continue doing the writing. And so until you get to
Yeah,
the point of unlimited money, you just want to find a way to keep doing the writing.
yeah, and you will go through ups and downs. I mean, I'm sure you've had that experience
Mm.
where once you create a certain level of freedom for yourself, your motives are called into question.
Yeah.
Like now that I don't need to write anymore because I have enough money in my bank account to, sustain me for a year, do I really want to go and write? And so
Mm.
I think, those motives, you can't assume that your future self will be motivated by the same things that you're currently motivated by. Just like you're not motivated by the same things that used to motivate you. And so, don't think that you've got it all figured out right now. Your future self may have different motives than you have. And it's okay if your motives shift.
And so, to what extent do you think about your future self and what motives they might have? Because to contextualize this, right now, when I'm thinking about what the hell am I going to do with my life, my present self is thinking, oh, well, I can just travel the world and become a productivity guru, whatever. But I'm concerned that what if my future self in 10 years' time will look back and think, you don't really just want to be a productivity guru on the internet. You kind of want to do something legit. Like being a doctor is kind of cool. So yeah. How
I
much
think
do
that that's a really good question. I think it's really good to ask yourself, and this is what the research shows. There's a lot of research. Dan Gilbert at Harvard, and yeah, he did a TED Talk called The Psychology of Your Future Self, but he also wrote the book Stumbling on Happiness, which sounds like you're a big Tim Ferriss fan. That's one of Tim Ferriss's biggest favorite books. Um, Also, I'm just blanking on his name. But anyways, yeah, basically the idea is you want to view your future self as a different person, and you actually really want to question what would they want rather than what you want. And so I think you should ask yourself, and and you can't really fully predict who your future self is going to be, but thinking about right now who you would like them to be, what would they say about you becoming a productivity guru? Like, is this where they want? Is this the direction that you ultimately want to show up? I think that that's really helpful for decision making. I can question my own goals for the same reason. In 10 years from now, who's the person I actually really want to be versus who's the person I'm just choosing to be right now.
Hmm.
And knowing where my future self is can clarify if the things I'm doing right now are actually a waste of time.
Sure. What does your journaling practice look like?
Very sketchy, very ugly.
Oh, yeah.
Usually I'll just write about what's going on right now.
Okay.
I'll write about what I'm doing today, what I'm doing, what's going on in my life. I'll write about my goals. I'll write about just thoughts. I mean, it's very just sketchy, but ultimately it ends up being conversations about where I'm at right now, what I'm trying to accomplish, what I'm struggling with, what I'm trying to solve. I do a lot of mind mapping, a lot of list making, writing down my goals, but it's ultimately just very sketchy. A lot of it's just writing where I'm at right now.
Okay.
But it is very helpful, incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I've kind of I have periods of my life where my journaling practice waxes and wanes, and I'll read an article from someone, or kind of straight after this, I'm on a motivational spree about journaling. I was like, yes, this is good. And certainly for the first few weeks of unemployment, I had a table out on the balcony. I'd make myself a cup of coffee, get the iPad out, and just like tap away for like sometimes even up to half an hour. And I just at the end of those sessions, I'd always feel, damn, this was actually really helpful. Like not trying to answer any questions in particular, just doing a generally free flowing whatever's on my mind. And it seems
It's
like
big. It's very big. I think it lets a lot out.
what's the deal with 30 grams of protein in the morning?
So that I don't actually fully do that. That was actually a 4-Hour Body thing, man.
Yeah.
I wrote that article after shortly reading the 4-Hour Body
Okay.
about Tim's concepts. So that's honestly Tim thing. Obviously, there's some good science behind it, but that was an article I honestly probably wrote 4 years ago.
Ah,
But I
okay,
mean, I
cool.
still do it. Honestly, it does satiate hunger.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a Tim Ferriss thing.
Yeah, I've often come across it in this context. Now, I saw that you had cited it, so I was like, oh, maybe you kind of know more of the evidence around it, because I've often wondered, like, how does
Have you
this
ever done it?
actually work?
Or done like a slow carb diet or anything like that?
I've never tried the slow carb diet, but at some point I used to have Huel every day in the mornings.
I don't even know what that
Oh,
is.
it's like Soylent. Oh, it's like a liquid meal replacement. It's like this powder.
Okay.
So that
Is
it's
it
like a vegan.
soy or protein or something?
Yeah, it's got some combination of all the stuff that has allegedly all the things you need. So 30 grams of
Okay,
protein
yeah,
and like
I've
a
heard
load of other
stuff
shit.
like that. Yeah.
And I'd mix it with milk and have like a smoothie in the morning. And I don't know, like I didn't feel particularly different. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like
I
people
mean,
talk
I
about
did
the
it for a
30
long
grams
time.
thing.
I used to wake up, drink a protein shake, go right in the morning, then go exercise, and it was a great routine for like 2 or 3 years. Generated a lot of blog posts.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking that now that I want to sort of set the intention to prepare for this exam, first I need to actually book it so that I don't have a choice. That I kind of have
Well,
to.
do you actually really want to do the exam is the question. That's what you're challenged by
Yeah.
is it really worth your time? You know what I mean?
That's the thing.
Do
Yeah.
you eliminate that option? Like, is there a genuine time frame to do it? Like, do you actually, if you didn't do it in 2 years from now, would there be repercussions? Like, I know in the legal field, like if you don't keep your bar exam up for or like something like that, you have to, you lose your license. Like, if you don't do it for 2 or 3 years, is there any costs?
It would be helpful to do it in the next 12 months because the system for the exam is changing to pass-fail 14 months from now. And if I'm backing myself that I can get a very high score, I should do that before it switches to pass-fail because then it'll really benefit my application. Whereas afterwards, it'll just like, now you have to go on a lot of other things. So that's kind of the only factor
If
that's
you
really...
pass it, is there anything else required of you, or does that just open up potential options if you want them?
If you pass it, then you have to take 2 more exams, and then you have to do some electives in the US. But essentially, this exam is the primary hurdle towards moving to America. And so until it becomes pass-fail, it is currently the most important thing in the application. Once it becomes pass-fail, no one's going to care about it anymore because everyone will pass it, and it will be other things that will now start to count. So,
Interesting. So you're just in the midst of questioning, is it worth your time?
yeah, that's the thing.
It sounds to me like you're going to do it.
I think I'm going to do it. I feel like it's, people prepare for it usually intensively for 3 to 6 months, kind of 8 hours a day. I'm thinking, to be honest, I've got 12 months to prepare for it. I can do 3 hours a day, spread it out, spaced repetition. Of course, that means the facts are more likely to stick kind of long term, and it's just generally useful to have this medical knowledge. Worst case scenario, I'll know more medicine, and then I can not go to America if I don't want to. Best case scenario right now, hey, go to America, do residency for 3 years, decide from then what I want to do in my life.
Well, so let's just play with something real quick
Yes.
if you're up for it. Let's just map out, and you don't have, this is by coming up with something, it doesn't mean you're required to do it. But like, what would be the ideal situation for you in 2 to 3 years from now? Would it be to be a doctor part-time in the U.S. and also to have this channel massively big and to have a lot of opportunities? If you were actually to map out where you would like to be ideally in 2 years from now, what would it actually look like? And I know you don't have all the answers, but let's just play with one scenario.
Sure. So 2 years from now is probably a bit too soon because the...
All right. What's a realistic time frame?
So if we say like, I don't know, 7 years from now, what I would love to be is doctor part-time, huge YouTube channel, books, courses and stuff, generating the whole passive income-y thingy, having the opportunities to travel the world and kind of either teach stuff that is medical related in medical schools because I love teaching medical stuff, but also kind of teaching stuff that's productivity and books and self-development and stuff through the YouTube channel
So in
and
7 years
through
from now,
life.
if you were an epic doctor
Yeah.
in the U.S., but you had the situation where you didn't have to do it full time, you were doing it part time, you also were making, it sounds like millions of dollars, given, I mean, your YouTube channel could be so big by then. You know what I mean? And you have the flexibility to teach medical advice to doctors and to humans, and
Yeah.
also you can teach effectiveness advice to humans as well.
Yeah.
And you did have the flexibility in your job to travel all over the world and to do what you wanted, but you did have a pretty epic gig doing part-time work in the medical field. That would be pretty amazing.
That would be pretty amazing. Yeah, that would be the dream.
That is the dream, at least right now.
At least right now. Often when I have chats to my brother about this, so he studied maths and now does his startup, and he cares a lot about kind of intentional living, and he strongly feels that that is only the dream because, like, he questions my actual desire to be a part-time doctor. But I think internally for me, maybe it's the case that this is just something that I'm clinging onto from a past life or something that my parents said or whatever. But right now, that seems like an absolutely dreamy future where emergency medicine part-time, doing some teaching, doing YouTubing, writing books, all of the stuff.
I think that it's okay if that's just what you choose. I think at the end of the day, what I like about the field of psychology and like the concept of perspection is that the idea is that you could come up with a million different futures, but ultimately you get to choose one, and it's your choice which one you choose, and it's okay if your brother doesn't fully agree with your reasons for it. You know what I mean? Like, you get to choose if that's the future you want to create, or you could choose to just eliminate, but it's ultimately your choice, the future you create, and going back to the idea that goals are bad, whatever goal you set, though, is the thing that will determine your present. Whatever future you have will determine your process. So if you choose not to become a doctor, that'll change your present. If you choose to be a doctor, it's going to change your present. So the goal always shapes the process, whatever that outcome is that you're seeking. But I mean, it sounded to me like that was pretty cool. The great part is that you don't have to justify what you want to anyone. You can just you get to actually just say that that's the future I want to create.
Yeah.
But if that actually is your ideal future, then it sounds like you absolutely should pass that test and move to the US. And it sounds like in many dimensions, you're creating that future right now. You know what I mean? And so I think you could be satisfied with the fact that you are building a YouTube channel that's already huge, and that in 7 years from now, it would be pretty crazy to see where you're at. But it sounds to me like by looking at your present, that future is very creatable. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, that future sounds very, from an outside view. I have a lot of confidence in your ability to create that future, and that in 7 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised to see you living in some amazing situation doing that. It sounds like, to me, that view is, in my opinion, what explains who you are today more than your past. That's why I think that the future is actually the easiest way to explain who a person is in the present.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess kind of in the present, the thing that will give me satisfaction is continuing to be in the flow, having conversations like this, doing preparation for the exam, making videos, just kind of getting into flow with that as the goal in mind, and measuring the gain, not the gap.
Yeah.
Damn.
And you're measuring the gain all the time. You do that by looking at YouTube views.
Look at the analytics every day.
Yeah, man. So you're measuring the gain all the time.
Two other things I wanted to ask you. Firstly, why adopted kids? Why not your own kids for some of them? Why did you go down that route?
We do have our own kids. We have, but why did we adopt some kids? My wife grew up with foster kids. My wife grew up with a bunch of foster kids in her home, and so that was something that she'd always wanted to do. It was never on my radar, even though my dad was adopted.
Yeah.
So when I got married to her, when we moved out to South Carolina to do my PhD at Clemson, she was like, we had talked about it before, but she was like, yeah, I really want to do foster care. And so when we moved out to South Carolina where I did my PhD, she basically said, well, not she, but we decided that was the time. But it was mostly her initial goal, and I just kind of had to come around to it in my mind. And so we got foster kids, and those were the first 3 we got. And we ended up fighting the legal system, or fighting in the legal system to adopt the kids. It took 3 years to do it, and we adopted them. And I'm glad I did it. This is a testament to me that you can change your desires, because when I first got the kids, I really admittedly didn't want to be a dad. I wanted to be a dad in my mind, like my future self was a dad, but the current me did not want it. Okay. But I learned to want it, and I learned to love it, and I invested myself in it. And now it's definitely a huge priority to me. And so, that's why we did it, is because she grew up with foster kids and she wanted to do it.
Interesting. And the kind of the whole learning to love it thing, is that just a case of over time you kind of just reframe stuff in your mind?
I
Or
think it really has to fit with your future self. I think
yeah,
you can't train yourself to want something that you ultimately don't see yourself wanting. I knew, based on my value system, my belief system, and things like that, that I wanted to be a dad. And I valued that, and I saw purpose in that. But the current version of me was not the future version of me. And when I was dealing with three kids who weren't mine, throwing tantrums and stuff like that, and taking over my time that I used to love as a single guy, or me and my wife were married, but we were grad students, and we got plenty of time to just sit and watch YouTube and do what we wanted. Now all of a sudden I'm coming home from school and like my house is trashed and these three kids with behavioral problems are there, and I'm like, do I really want this?
yeah,
That's, I think, when you have to really question what you really want for yourself. And for me, I knew that for myself, I saw my future self as someone who was a great dad. So that was something I valued enough that I actually did train myself to want it. Just like writing for me. I didn't consider myself great at writing, but I valued it enough to become good at it.
awesome. And then final thing, kind of on that note, given that I'm writing this book and you have done this a few times, any tips beyond just show up and do the thing that you found helpful?
Yes, a lot of tips. One would be, if you can, hire an external editor.
Okay.
It sounds like you got a book deal.
Yeah.
So Tucker Max, who famously wrote "I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell," he's actually really good friends with Tim Ferriss and Ryan Holiday, etc. He edited this book. He edited Who Not How. I find that investing in someone who investing money into an external editor can really help.
What sort of ballpark figure are we talking about? Are we talking 5 figures, 6 figures, 4 figures?
Probably 4 to 5 figures.
Okay.
Yeah, depends. Depends on where you're at. But I think it's good to have someone that you can ideate with, and that also can help you get structure. Because the hardest part about writing, especially a book, is structuring it.
Yeah.
Once you get the structure right, then the writing comes easy. For me, this book took a year longer to write because my editor at the time couldn't help me get the structure. He couldn't. I was playing with like 1,000 different ideas, and he couldn't help me turn them into a clear structure. Whereas once I started working with an editor who really could comprehend it, then I was able to create the structure, which made the writing go so fast.
Okay.
So yeah, I think just getting someone who can help you structure your concepts into a flow, into a really good structure, that's really the place to start. And sometimes you do that by wolfing down or barfing out a really fast draft.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you need to get the structure right. And usually it's about having the right editor, having the right feedback loops, fast feedback loops, sending them junk, getting quick feedback, and ultimately getting a structure that you really like so that you can go for it.
Okay. So structure first, and then once you have the structure, you kind of write with structure in mind, as opposed to writing a series of blog posts and later figuring out, let's shove this one there and tweak a few things to make it flow.
Yeah, I think if you have the structure, then it changes which blog posts you choose to stick in, and it changes how those blog posts are written. If you're just randomly writing blog posts, and unless this book is just a collection of ideas. If this book is like 21 ways to be effective, then
it's not one of those ones. Yeah.
But if you're really trying to create, a synthesis and a really new, unique idea, then you have to really think, what is the actual pearl of the idea?
Yeah.
What is the core of the idea, and what's the most simple structure for how you can explain this and frame it in a linear, logical way?
Okay.
In the case of Personalities and Permanent, I thought that this book was going to be a series of blog posts, just because that was what I was accustomed to writing. I thought it'd be like 40 or 50 short chapters, but it became obvious that was a really bad way to try to explain this book.
Okay. And then, so one thing that people often criticize about, especially nonfiction self-help books, is that, to be honest, this whole book could really be a blog post, but they've padded it out to 80,000 words because they want to, and they've added a load of fluff and a load of examples because they want to get on the speaking conference circuit to make loads of money. And people I've mentioned the book deal to have had some variants of that response that, well, just make sure it's not fluff. How do you think about this balance of length versus actually how many words do you actually need to get the point across?
Have you talked to your publisher about how many words they want?
Yeah, they said around about 80,000 is probably about fairly reasonable.
Wow.
Is that long?
Yeah, 80?
Yeah. How big is your one? I've got this thingy. this version of it.
That's so funny. Yeah, so this book right here, this is what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
It's about 63 or 64,000 words.
Okay.
Um, yeah, one thing I liked about my publisher is that they didn't care about the size. They more cared about the quality.
Okay.
And so if it had been 20,000 words, they may have been a little discouraged because
it looks a bit small.
It looks
yeah.
well, they care about shelf space and stuff like that, and readers perceive value by length to some degree. But we re-asked the initial question. You were talking about page length. Oh yeah, we're talking about fluff, right?
Yeah, fluff versus because I feel like for most nonfiction books, they probably could be condensed down to, I don't know, 30 pages rather than 130 pages. To what extent is that the case for your book / your writing? How do you think about padding it out to fit 60,000 words, or is it?
It's weird because I kind of got my education in blogging through John Morrow and Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And what I learned from both of them is that long form wins. Tim said Tim and John both said that their best blog posts were at least 3,000 words.
Yeah.
Most viral, and even this is an hour and a half long conversation. And so I never actually was afraid of making things concise. I actually tried to figure out ways to make things longer and better. So I think as long as I think one thing that Tim said is when in doubt, leave it out. And so I think as long as you feel really good about it, and as long as it connects with the key theme and it's actually furthering the agenda, I don't think it's bad. As long as if someone's enjoying it, they'll stick with it. And so as long as it's highly valuable and you're not just creating padding to reach the word count.
That was my concern. It's like
don't do that. Eliminate that as the goal. But as long as you're still finding useful things to add to it, which really further the cause. Add to it. And if you reach a point where you're like, honestly, I don't think that there's anything more we can add, then you have to have that conversation with your publisher. And if it's 20,000 words short, but you feel like adding more would actually be subtraction, then that's a bridge to cross.
Yeah, they'll probably be okay with that.
If you're just like, this is it, I don't want to add any more, then I think that they'll be satisfied as long as you can argue that adding would be subtraction at this point.
Adding would be subtraction, okay. Awesome. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. Everyone buy the book. Links in the video description. Anything else you'd like to kind of plug / any message for the audience as a whole?
I have one call to action. Go to benjaminhardy.com and get the free Future Self program. That program honestly could and should be worth thousands of dollars. I've sold it for hundreds of dollars, but it is a deep dive. Literally about 30 videos. Most of them are 10 minutes long with journal prompts, calls to actions, daily emails. I think in 30 days, invest in your future self. In this case, it's free, but invest the time. But I think that I like the quote from Alain de Botton, and he says, if you're not embarrassed of who you were 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough. I find that if you can have enough peak experiences, that you're going to be different from who you were in 30 days, and so that's the goal of this course, is that in 30 days from now, you've had enough peak experiences, clarified enough things, reframed enough trauma where you aren't the same person you were. And I actually genuinely believe I'm not the same person I was 30 days ago. I think I've seen and experienced things, and I'm at a place where my former self couldn't have been. So benjaminhardy.com is where it's at.
Amazing. I will be checking that out myself as well.
Dude, you're awesome. Is there anything I can do for you?
No, this is actually
more than happy to write about your book. When you write it, send me a draft. I'll write about it on different platforms.
Oh, amazing. That would be nice.
But if there's anything I can do for you, seriously, let me know.
So at the moment, I only have this version of the book. Presumably it's available on Amazon and stuff for the proper version.
Oh yeah, hardcover, Audible, Kindle. Yeah, I mean, I actually sent all. I don't know when that got to you. When did that get to you?
A few months ago.
Yeah. I sent that to you before the book came out, and it was in the middle of COVID, and so my publisher literally couldn't print out normal gal.
Okay, no, fine.
So actually, don't show that to the publisher.
Yeah, because I've got this book club series where I kind of summarize and talk about ideas from books. So I've seen some of them. I love them. Yeah, so I want to do I want to do one about this one. Yeah. And so I'll cut out bits from this interview and chuck them in relevant sections as it's like where relevant. So that'll be fun. I'll send you a link when it's ready.
Cool, man. Well, just let me know if there's anything I can do to support your goals.
Will do. Thanks, man. That's very kind. I feel I've had a few peak experiences this conversation, so thanks for taking the time.
No worries, man. Have a great day.
All right, I'll see you later, and thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dive. Links to all of your stuff in the video description, and we'll see you all next time.